everyone, welcome to Beyond the Romance. This is the drama channel where I, your host Caroline Hines, talk about my favorite Asian dramas. And occasionally I have special episodes where I talk to guests, and today this is one of those. So this is the episode where I'm going to talk about Hellbound with my two friends, Josephine and Joycelyn. And if you don't know Hellbound, Hellbound is the most recent what would I say? I call it a supernatural theological psychological drama by writer and director Yeon Sang-ho. Now, if you don't know his name, he is the writer and director of Train to Busan, my all-time favorite horror movie, as well as Peninsula, which was the sequel to Train to Busan. So this is his first drama, and I think he's done an amazing job with it, and we're going to get into that. But before we go all into the drama, I'll just read a brief synopsis of what it is. So basically, it's like people hear a prediction on when they will die. When that time comes, a death angel appears in front of them and kills them. And we're gonna get into spoilers, so we're gonna get into all of that. But that's the gist of this show. Is these three beings, from heaven or hell or outer space, possibly, come down and they drag these people, beat them up, torch them, and presumably send their souls to eternal damnation in hell. And the interesting thing about this show is that premise, even though it's explored in the film, it's never really answered, even up until the end, because you don't know, are they really sent to hell? And that's what we are going to discuss today, because Josie,
You're doing great.
Iceland, and I
It's fine.
talked about this a lot in our Twitter DMs, and we were like, we have to talk about this. So I invited them back to talk with me about this show, because it's so fascinating. And like all three of us like grew up in conservative households. We have a lot of connections to churches and theology, and we just think that the way how this show explores, I think, religion, faith, belief, media, politicians, cults are just like super fascinating. So we will get into it. So the way how this show starts is this guy, he is in a cafe. All we see is him looking anxious, and people are talking about this group of people called New Truth, led by a man called Jung Jin-soo, who is played by Yoo A-in. And no one knows what's going on, but you just see these three beings appear out of thin air, chase this poor man out of a cafe, rain destruction on trash cars, trash buildings, and they burn him. So for Josie and Joycelyn, what were your first thoughts about the beginning of Hellbound?
At first of all, I didn't think that it was going to be the way it was, because I saw the trailer and I was thinking, oh, it's going to be an apocalypse. It's the end of the world. They're going to run around killing everyone. But then the show starts and he's sitting in a cafe and he's looking at his phone. And at first I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, they tell you the time you're going to die. Oh, that's so nice of them. Until these like big things just barge into the cafe. And at first I thought they wouldn't, like other people wouldn't see them. But then when he was running and just like I can see it now. The first thing I said when he hit his head, not even on the pavement, but on the bus, I was like, I do not want to go to hell at all, because if that's what you got to do to go to hell,
we don't.
I don't want no parts of that. Like, no. First impressions was that I don't want to go to hell. I never want to meet those three, whatever the heck they are. And I just need to keep myself away from humans. That is the first thing I thought of. Yes.
Josie, what was your first thought?
Similarly, yes, it was probably, I think we had seen the cafe, like part of the cafe scene in the trailers, if I'm not mistaken. Because I was like, oh, this looks familiar. And then, the guy looks super nervous. And then all of a sudden he starts running, and then these things start running after him. And I was not ready for how bloody it was. Mm-hmm. It's not as bloody as other things I've seen, but in my mind, I was just like, why are they beating him up? Why is it so gruesome? He's just going to hell. He's going to get burnt in hell. Why are they starting now? And so I was just like, oh, we're in for something special here. And so that's kind of when I was like, okay, this is going to be a ride. This is definitely be a ride for 6 episodes. And it was.
Yep, same. Because I first saw this show at TIFF, and that's the Toronto International Film Festival, and that was in September. And this was only thing that I saw in theater for the festival. And this was my exception because, you know, COVID, we're in the middle of a pandemic, people. And I was like, I am not going in a full cinema for any film, anything. The only reason I watched this is because like Peninsula and Train to Busan, I love Yeon Sang-ho's work. I think Train to Busan is one of my all-time favorite films, if not my most favorite film. It's definitely my favorite horror film. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch it. There were 6 people in the cinema, so it was just me and 6 other people. And I'm like, fine. When this show starts, it's, as you said, it starts very mundanely. It's just this guy in a cafe, but then you hear the dialogue of what's going on here. They're talking about these mysterious beings coming down. The guy is looking super stressed, and you see the trailer. The trailer does not prepare you at all. Like, this trailer is literally just the opening, like the first 4 scenes of this whole series. This trailer gives nothing away, because what happens, like it's so brutal. Like, it's violent, but the difference between this, I think, and other shows is because the violence is perpetrated by these beings. Like, and they're doing it mercilessly. Like, they're just hunting him, they're hounding him, and they're beating him. And then, like, as Josie said, like, and then as Joy said, like, you don't want to go to hell. And I think like this, because we were talking about how this show explores religion, like especially in Protestant churches, and I think also Catholicism. Like, in Catholicism, the way how hell is described is, I think, different to Protestant. And with Catholicism, it's more about eternal damnation and torment, and your body is going to be tormented for eternity. You're going to be tested and, you know, like burning forever. Whereas, like, for, I think, in Protestant churches, it's like you go to hell, and like you kind of don't want to think about what else happens when you go to hell. And then for this show, like, and then the thing is like we also think, okay, however you die is however you're going to enter hell, right? If you go to hell, that's how you're going to enter. So if you die in your sleep, you're like, but your soul goes to hell. If you die in an accident, like, it's all different. But in this premise, they're saying your exit into hell will be bloody and violent and painful and
Yes.
public.
Public.
And it kind of reminded me of the Spanish Inquisitions and those trials that they used to have back in the Dark Ages about, you know, to test people's belief. You know, if you didn't believe in God, and if you didn't believe in the Catholic Church, you would be publicly tormented and tested and brutalized. And it kind of like struck me as being similar, because I found this show is also examining how religion is portrayed to people, especially through media. And it's kind of showing this is like, you are having a public execution. You're publicly damned to hell. And that's what they call it in the film. In the show, they call it a demonstration, where these beings come down. Like, it's a demonstration of what. And I think it's so interesting to use the word demonstration, because the demonstration it explains how things happen. Like, if you want something to do, this is how I demonstrate to you what it is. So they're basically saying this is a demonstration of what's going to happen to you after you go to hell. But I'm like, God damn, the entrance into hell is just as violent than anything else. Like, painful.
Can you just take me there? Like, that, please? Like, that's what I was thinking. I was like, why can't they just like hold his hand and just take him to hell? Why do they need to do all of that? But like, I like the point of the demonstration, because like in, what was it, episode 3 or episode 2, when they do the demonstration with the mom, there are people with masks sitting in the back of her, and everyone is judging her. Like, you are all sinners, but they're all literally like the Pharisees just judging, just looking at her and judging every single thing. And she's just sitting there waiting for her judgment, and she can't even say anything about it. It was like,
So
no. Sorry.
And she's a woman on top of that, which kind of
a mother
and a woman.
And that's actually why I think we can start here, because the thing with this show is like, if the thing with a lot of Korean dramas, a lot of Asian dramas, is the way how they use these dramas to explore social commentary about the culture and the behavior of people in Britain. In this case, we're talking South Korea. So like, South Korea is an extremely patriarchal society. It's extremely misogynistic. It is not nice to women. Like, when you read the news articles, when you see read about trials that take place to women who've been battered and abused and even killed, like, the leniency that men get when they harm and kill women is mind-boggling. Like men would get up with like a slap on the wrist for terrible acts, right? And like they'll chalk it up and say, oh, like they're mentally disturbed because they were drunk. You know, they'll use these kind of excuses. And this show kind of explores this, anything in a very subtle way with regards to how women are treated in particular, because we see it with the mom, like Josie mentioned, Park Jung-ja, and she's played by Kim Shin-rook. And she is, I think, a prime example of how not only South Korea, but patriarchal societies in general, like all around the world, North America, Europe, Asia, treat women. And like her, like when this is happening, because like we're talking about judgment, and they say these beings appear after someone has received a decree, which is where this being, this face, this bodily face, appears out of thin air and tells the person, you're going to die on such and such day at such and such time. And that kind of also reminded me of stories in the Bible where, you know, like God appeared or angels appeared to either prophets or to people who would receive damnation. Like you had like and also one of the scenes also reminded me of there's Daniel in the lion's den. Then there is and then it's also, is it Daniel also in the burning
his friends in them
with the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? So they kind of reminded me of that, where how you have angels appearing. So I think that's where you really get a lot of the biblical references. But then like this face appears to her in front of her kids and tells her, you're gonna die. You've been found weighed and found wanting, and you are a sinner, so you're gonna die. She decides she's gonna go and get help, and she realizes she can't get help, so she goes to these people. She go to the new truth people who are led by Jung Jin-soo, and he tells her, well, you're gonna die. And she's like, well, I'm gonna let you show me getting killed if you help me look after my kids. And before that happens, he's like, well, we need to go to your home, figure out how this is going to happen. And she's like, I'm going to get a lawyer. I'm going to draw you up to hold you to a contract where you're going to have to contractually look after my kids. And while they're drawing out the contract with the lawyer, who is Min Hye-jin, played by Kim Yeon-ju, she's like,
love her.
She's talking about her kids, and they're like trying to figure out what's her sin. And then he makes a point to say, oh, your kids, I noticed that your kids, your boy and your daughter and your son are 2 different ages. And they don't look alike, which means they possibly have different dads. He's assuming that that they have different dads, right?
Now
he's like, oh, your kids don't really look alike. I'm like, that's such a BS reasoning to assume that someone has, like, the kids have different fathers. But then you realize he's judging her. And he's saying, oh, so your sin is that you had 2 kids by 2 separate men.
Yeah.
So I'll get into my reaction to that, but I want to hear your reactions to this, because so much I think of this show explores motherhood and how women are treated, and we get into that especially with the later episodes with from episode 4 to 6. But for the two of you, how did you feel about Jung-ja's judgment?
Upset, very upset, very taken aback, because it makes sense along the vein that, he's this cult leader, this, they're very probably super conservative, and all this idea of sinning, and it kind of made me upset, because as someone, like you said, who grew up in a conservative Pentecostal background, we always attack the woman in adultery or when a woman in a sexual sin, but where are the men? Where she didn't have those 2 children on her own, and it's not a sin to have 2 kids by 2 different fathers. I mean, and it was just so upsetting. And again, I was like, I'm not surprised because yes, it was an issue for Jin Soo in Hellbound, and it's unfortunately still an issue in modern day 2021, because I watch daily dramas, and that's a huge plot point still, is a mother with 2 different fathers for her children. So upset, but not surprised. Yeah.
I was trying to figure out what her sin actually was, even after he said that, because I was like, okay, she has 2 different kids with 2 different men. And I was like, so what's her actual sin? Like, what exactly did she do? I thought they were actually going to stamp it on her, like, her sin is she killed someone or something. no, but that's her sin. And what I found interesting is that after everyone around her figured out, like maybe their assumption of what her sin was, then they not only went after her, but they went after her kids. So because you are your mother's sin, so that sin, that burden comes on to you. So we have to go after the kids as well. And then they started showing her picture and they were like, look at her. She looks like a sinner. I'm just like, what the heck does a sinner look like? What exactly did she do? You have no idea how, first of all, how she got these kids, where these dads are, or if there's like more than one dad. You don't know any of that. You don't know if she adopted them. You don't know her background. And it makes me think about how like there's just an assumption of who somebody is just by like how they look and your perception of who they are. So automatically, if she's a single mother, her kids are bad because there's nobody else at home. That her sin is that she slept with multiple people and then she doesn't know who her kids belong to. Like there's just an assumption of who she is and you don't even know her. This woman is just taking care of her kids and now they're like, this big balloon tells her you're gonna go and die. Then instead of crying, she goes to look for help and she's coming to you seeking your help and you're part of the church. Kids. Yes, her kids too are like, help my mom because this is the only person I know. I love her. Like when the son walked in and was like, my mother has never done anything wrong. Like, why are you putting this scarlet letter on her? And then she had to tell them to go to their room because it was just heartbreaking. It was just, yeah.
Yeah, for me, I was so upset because I was when it clicked for me. I'm like, you're saying that this woman deserves to die in such a horrific way because she has two kids from two different guys. No one is questioning where the dads are. Like, why are they not there helping her raise them? Right? Yeah. And I'm like, does this mean that the fathers aren't going to be judged, but the mother is going to be judged? And then it's like they're also putting it in comparison to all of these other people that received judgment because it's revealed that people that were previously demonstrated, people who previously went through demonstrations like were murderers, frauds, people who harmed other people. One was an abuser, one was a rapist. I'm like, you're putting her in the same category as a murderer, a rapist, and abuser. And I was so upset. I'm like, how could you? But then as the show goes on, you realize why this happens, because again, it's a commentary on how women are perceived in patriarchal societies, because just like men are allowed to treat women any old how way, but women are judged for like things that they have no right being judged for. Like a woman, like she was looking after her kids, she was a good mom, she cared about her children, she put herself on display to make sure that her kids would be looked after. Because like Josie, you mentioned the people that were judging her online. So like a group of these people are called the Arrowheads, and they're led by this character called Lee Dong-wook, which I thought was a reference that of course actor Lee Dong-wook, but I think it's also a reference to I think it may also be a reference to his character in Strangers from Hell. Because like this character is horrific. The things he says and the things he encourages people to do are horrific. And like he has a group of people who go after people to beat people and harm them in the name of God. Like they're carrying out judgment. They're like, we're gonna we're gonna carry out judgment on you and we're gonna beat you because you're a sinner and you need to repent. And I'm like, how could you? Like, you have no right to judge anyone. You're committing acts of violence in the name of God. But again, these are things that we've seen happen time and time again. Like religion, a lot of religion is founded on the premise of violence in the name of God. The Catholic Church came out of violence in the name of God.
Yes.
The Protestant Church came out of violence in the name of God, right? And these characters, if you've seen The Devil Judge, there's a group of characters in The Devil Judge that does the same thing. They're led by this guy on Instagram. I think it's Instagram or like a social media platform, and he encourages them to beat people. But in Devil Judge, it's all about social inequality, and but here it's about religion. It's about judgment and sin and who is a sinner. And the thing that's tying in, I think, to other women is there's like the first murder, the way how this plays out, I think they're also connected is because a lot of things that happen from episode 4 to 6 happens because of a female character. And this is the cop's daughter. So she is Jin Hee-jung, played by Ide, and she's so good. She's such a good character. I think this actress did such a
Yes.
phenomenal job. Like there's a scene with her in episode 2 that is just bone chilling. But when you
She's
think about how
burning
much
that
of this
man.
if you think about how much of this show goes wrong, not the show, how many things go wrong because of a female character,
Mhm.
it like kind of like shows, I think like Yeon Sang-ho, he's showing how important and how pivotal women are to society, but in different ways. Because he Jung, she kills this man that she believes is the one who killed her father. No, not her
Her
father, sorry.
mother.
That killed her mother, thank you. And the reason she believes this is because Jin-soo tells her that. Right? She had no
Yeah.
proof. Like we find out that it was him because they did like genetic testing, whatever. But she, at the moment that she does it, doesn't really know. She just believes that he is because this is what she's told. And the reason she believes this is because she has so much guilt. And she has guilt because she believes her mom died because of her, because of something that happened. And when you think about it, when the way how Jin-soo manipulates the cop, who is, again, I said Kim Kyung-hun, he, at the end, where he kind of says, I'm gonna leave you in charge to decide the fate of the world because of your daughter, to protect your daughter. So again, this is a parent making decisions that affects the world because they're trying to protect their kids. So tell me what you think about that, because that's my theory. I'm thinking that a lot of this has, when you really look at the show, how a lot of things have progressed because of parents and how parents make for their kids.
I kind of saw it kind of as a test, Jinsu. He was giving Kyung-hyun because he grew up as an orphan. You know, he had to grow up in a Catholic orphanage, mind you, and he didn't have a parent, or he didn't have a parent-like or guardian figure to protect him, to make sure he was okay. And so he gets to that point in episode 3. In my mind, I was looking at it kind of as if he is testing to see the limits a father will go for their child. And in his mind, he knows that if you truly love your daughter, you will not say anything. You won't record, you won't do anything, because you should love your daughter enough. It doesn't matter. Heaven, hell, whatever, protect your kid. That's how I saw it, because, didn't have parents. So he's kind of testing Kyung-hyun. So that's how I saw it from my perspective. And then obviously Kyung-hyun does end up not recording, but he had to protect his baby.
Yeah. I saw it the same way, but I feel like in this, actually throughout the whole entire thing with the parenting, it's just playing on everyone's vulnerability. Like you're getting everyone in a vulnerable state. Like the mom is working and she's already exhausted. She's about to die. She's like in this vulnerable state right now. She needs to find a way to protect her daughter. There's a dad who had to put his basically his job on the line and everything, and he's already having a disconnect with his daughter. Now he finds out that his daughter is now a murderer. Like he has to put his morals and everything down, and he's basically being manipulated during a vulnerable time. It's the same thing with the couple in episode 4 and on. Everyone is caught in this vulnerable time or like vulnerable moment in their life where they have to choose. And it's like, even your temporary chosen whatever, like it's gonna have a long lasting like effect, whatever it is. Because he chose not to tell, then the world at 4 and through 6 doesn't know actually what happened, because she chose to just believe these people. She ended up dying because someone chose this, but they're all choosing because they feel like they have no choice. Does that make any sense?
No, it does. And I think that is a big part of it. Like a lot of the themes in the show are about how people's vulnerabilities are
Mhm.
exploited. And like for now, we're talking about parents and like the vulnerability of a parent trying to protect their kid. But then I also think it's about kind of like how that vulnerability kind of feeds into a type of selfishness where
Mhm.
you're only thinking of protecting your child in that moment, but you're not thinking about what you're protecting that child means for
For the rest.
them going forward in the future, and what that means for everyone else around them. Because speaking about Kyung-hun, he's protecting his daughter. Great. But in protecting her this way, it's preventing her from facing consequences because the option was reveal that your daughter is a murderer,
Mhm.
and you do that, but you also reveal to the world that these beings are not judgmental. They're not here, they're not creating judgment on God's behalf. They're just these beings that appear and are creating havoc. We don't know why, but it has nothing to do with God. And he didn't choose that option. He chose to keep up Jin-soo's lie,
Mhm.
which put the lives of multiple, like we don't even know, like an untold number of people's lives in jeopardy. And he also let his daughter get away with murder. He showed her that there are no consequences for her action. He's showing her that her, because it's like the scene where I'm talking where she does a very Ide does such a great job, is she looks like a psychopath. She's reveling in this murder. She's enjoying this death, and it has nothing only to do with receiving what she believes is revenge or justice for her mom's death. You can tell she's enjoying watching this man burn,
Right.
and
She got
he
a
has
taste of
given
it.
his daughter the idea, the belief that she can get away with this now. And like that kind of, and because like when everything that happens after that can be traced right back in to what happens with the parents, with what him making his choice for his daughter. But then also we talking about the mom. We saw the differences that parents will, that different ways parents will do for their kids, because Jungja, she sent her kids away. They're young and she's protecting them. She sacrificed herself for them. But Kyung-hun is not sacrificing himself for his daughter. He's protecting his career
Mhm.
to keep her, like, he's saying he's protecting her, but I think it's also him being the fact that he's a cop. He doesn't want the world to know, like, I'm a cop and my daughter's a murderer too.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of shows like the difference in selfishness. And at the end, like we at the end, like we'll get more into this, but at the end, like we see the parents, the two parents sacrifice, do everything they could to protect their daughter. And again, that's where so you can see the differences, like different ways parents protect their kids, but the different reasons why they protect their kids. And I think that's going to tie into something that we're going to get into about the very, very last scene of this show, because I think the very last scene is so important to understand what the difference in sacrifice is and what sacrifice really means.
There's another parent that we missed. I don't remember the name because they technically didn't show them, but it's the loan shark. Do you remember? Like there's the loan sharks that come after in 4 through 6 and they're beating people and they're taking money. Well, I don't know who it was. I think it was from the New Truth or something. They just say something like he didn't learn from his mother, who's also a loan shark, that this is not
okay.
how
I know what
supposed
you're
to be.
talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I
The
thought that
people
was
that
interesting
Soto law
too.
firm uses to
Yeah.
hide the
Mhm.
to hide the people.
Yeah.
No, you're right, because when we get the time jump in episode 4, this is 2027 now, so the show starts in 2023, and so we jump forward 4 years. We learn that the New Truth people have become predominant around South Korean society. They are the predominant, not only I used to say media leaders, but also religion. And what they've done is that they've manifested people's fear so well. They've learned how to manipulate the mass, people en masse so well. Like they have people do public confessions where they have the kids may admonish their parents. The kids are like, you have to confess your sins so that you don't die. And it has nothing again to do with saving the kids. It has nothing to do with saving the family. It's about if you don't want judgment, then you still get like, if you don't want to be judged, if you don't want to be dragged to hell, you have to admit your faults and your sins, your perceived faults and sins publicly. And a lot of that happens because the parents have to confess in front of their kids. And that's what and that you're talking about the parents, because like he it's assumed that his mom did the same thing, but she still died, right? And they're saying that the same thing's gonna happen to him because he didn't learn from his mother's mistakes, which is where it shows that like they're talking about the Bible again. Like in the Bible, it talks about the sin of the parents being visited upon the child. And then a lot, especially in Protestant and Pentecostal churches, we believe in generational curses, where if like things can follow through generational line, something that happens to the parents can happen to the child because of generational curses. I read that in a lot to it. So for the two of you, because like the three of us, like we all have like Palestinian roots. I'm Bajan, and Joseph and Josie's family is Haitian. And Joy, your family is your family's Haitian too?
No, I'm from Ghana.
Why do I think Haitian? Why do I think Haitian? You said this before too, and I know this. But
We're all cousins.
Yeah, exactly.
Diaspora. We're all members of the diaspora.
All diaspora.
Yeah, but for the two of you, like how did you see that in, because of like your own brains and your own cultural, because we all, like, again, diaspora, we all have a lot of similarities in our culture and in our spiritual beliefs especially. So for the two of you, like how did you read into this aspect of like parenting, and how parenting and parental obligation and generational curses is explored in the show?
I loved it. And what I loved is like the whole parenting, like whatever happens in the past will come back to the future, and then you'll literally be haunted. So for example, if you have a family member who murdered someone, like we can say this back home, if you have someone who murdered someone in the past, like don't marry into that family because they have killer blood in them, which is what I thought was interesting. When Yoo A-in, his character was like, he was an orphan, because back home they're like, you can't associate with people who don't have parents. And I was like, okay. Then I started thinking about like his whole entire background around how he was by himself his whole entire life. So even when he brought up him wanting to kill himself, like he did not feel wanted or needed until he created this fake cult. And I started thinking about back home, where it's like they tell you not to associate with people. So he already hates everyone. So I was thinking, okay, he's going to probably think about all the people who hated him because he didn't have any family home training or anything. And he's going to utilize that to like not only connect with people and make them come on his side, but he's going to punish people because they were never by him. That was like my thing with, okay, he doesn't have parents, he has no one. So he's going to use that against everyone else. And then going back to the parenting, which is why I thought that he went after like the detective, because he's like, okay, this is not only because he's a detective, but that's a one parent household that he's going after. So he already knows that he can manipulate her more than if he found someone from a two-parent household. Like that's how I was like reading it and looking at it, which is why he knew he could judge the mom, because it's just her. And I was just looking at it like, wow, I didn't think about it being like that until after those 3 episodes were done. And I was like, if I could think about how it is back home, if you're an orphan, nobody likes you, nobody cares about you. You can become a billionaire, but everyone's going to be like, well, you have no family, you have no roots. So it's like he's trying to build his own roots. I mean, granted, his roots were evil, but he was still trying to build them. The same thing with everyone else. So I thought that was interesting. So yeah.
Yeah, for me, the idea of like generational curses kind of hit home a lot, because my parents are still the type to like sneak into your room and pray over you at night.
Girl, 12 o'clock in the morning.
My mom might be doing that. She used to come in bed with a bottle of olive oil.
Yes.
Anoint these children, all over the siblings, the great-great-grandfather who did this.
Yes.
I'm like, I don't know how you knew that, but okay. But, it really did hit home, because they preach. I remember growing up and listening to that and hearing, you have to pray so you can get released from the sins of your grandfathers and your great-grandfathers and your great-grandmothers. And I'm just like, why do I have to carry that in 2021? Like, why do I have to do that? And the way that shame and family was explored hit home as well, because we as a diaspora, I think in general, can kind of talk about like, don't bring shame to the family. Don't do something that will bring some dishonor to the family name. If another family, something happened to them, don't associate with them. Don't marry into them. Don't do anything with them because you don't want to bring that over here. And so a lot of that, and there's this one scene where the little girl, I think was it episode 4, where the little girl is kneeling in front of her mom and her dad, and she's crying and she's asking for, she's like, this is what my father did. This is what my father did. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He's a sinner. I'm sorry. He's a sinner. And again, that was just like, wow, the whole point of it is not to bring the sin to your child. You don't want to carry that. You don't want to carry that over to the next generation. But the way that the new life and the new life, the true new life, or
New Truth. But I always want to say New Life because that's the name of a church back home.
the name of a church back home. But in the Arrowhead, the way they do it, like it's one person, but the whole family. It's like the whole family suffers. Just like for one perceived sin, the whole family has to suffer, and the whole family is just in torment. And that just was like, this is not it, because that's kind of one of the reasons why, a lot of us, as we get older, we kind of start thinking for ourselves and dissociate from that mentality, where just because one person in the family does something, it does not mean the whole family needs to suffer and the whole family has to pay for it. And it's even worse because the sins in Hellbound are not really I'm like, they're not sins. Like there's like
the murderers, but
you know what I mean? The murderers, yes, but the other things, like Jung-ja, her kids did not have to go through that. They did not have to. That little baby in episode 4 did not have to be crying on national television. It's just although it's happening, this is set in South Korea, it still resonates here with my cultural background. So that was definitely something that spoke to me.
Like, so that, like, I'm gonna get into the baby, because I think the baby is such an interesting, I'm going to use it as a plot device. I'm going to use the term plot device. But first, when talking about Jin-soo being an orphan, this is something I was discussing with a friend. And because this is something we see often in Asian dramas, and I think, but then I started thinking about how it is culturally as well, where if a child or an adult is an orphan, they have no parents, they have no guardian, they grew up in an orphanage, how they're shunned and looked down upon in society. And you're thinking, why are you berating this person for not having a parent? Why? This is something that you should be compassionate about. This is something you should want to take care. If you see a child doesn't have a parent, they're growing up in an orphanage, you should be saying, okay, I'm gonna try to treat this person with compassion. I'm gonna try to be caring. I'm gonna try to be understanding. No, instead what we're getting is people saying, oh, you're not worthy of like care, you're not worthy of love, you're a burden on society, whatever, because you're an orphan. And logically we know that this is absurd, and it's something that seems cruel and it's mean. And then but then you think about, but then like I was thinking, like Joy mentioned, is culturally, and like you mentioned, is culturally, is this like this kind of does happen where if, and it kind of ties into the whole women being judged for having kids by different fathers, or the fathers not being around, where you're judging the person for a situation they have no control over. In this case, it's the child without a parent. But then you also, like, it's kind of tied into the same thing where, for instance, like they'll still judge they would have still judged Jin-soo, sorry, for being raised by a mother, for being raised by his mother alone, right? Because he's still kind of similar to the two kids of Jung-ja's kids. Like they were like, those people, the Arrowheads and everyone on social media, were judging these kids for something that has nothing to do with them. They're judging these kids for their parents' decisions. They're judging Jin-soo for being an orphan. They're looking down on him for not having a guardian, or a guardian they would approve of. And it does it does mess up people's psyche. It does mess up children's psyche, because like that made him into who he became. He said he didn't like society. He wanted to escape society. He wanted to die. Thing is, I don't think he was actually suicidal. I'm gonna get into that because of the way he tried to commit suicide. And like I'm like, dude, you know, you full of it. You didn't really want to die. You wanted to go on a track because like who wants to commit suicide on an expensive trip to Tibet in the plains of Tibet wearing this expensive hiking gear?
You
But
don't know.
we'll get into that. But the thing is like it made him like hate society. And like when we find out at the end of episode 3, the reason he does everything, came up with the new truth concept, came up with the concept of these beings from God and like wanting judgment for God, is because he hated society. He wanted society. He wanted to get back at society. He wanted society to feel the pain that they made him feel from the time he was a child. He was also in a way getting back at his mother, because he said that he did everything that he could to make sure his mom would come back, because he thought if he was a good boy, if he listened, if he was never rebellious, if he never lied, if he was never mean to people, that his mother would come back for him. He waited for his mother to come back for him, and she didn't. So he grew to hate everyone else around him. Again, this is another example of society paying for the decision that a parent made. Same way as with the cop making a decision for his kid and everyone else paying for it. Same way as Jin-soo's mom abandoning him came up to the point that society ended up paying for a decision that she made. It's not her fault. She has no idea this is happening. But this is a third thread that I think the show's exploring, where it's showing like every action has consequences, whether they're intended or not. And that's the whole thing with judgment. And this is something that I want to get into that. And this is kind of hinged on that, because the reason Jin-soo goes after the daughter is because of a comment, just one comment that Kyung-hoon says. And he says like, if God is punishing people for their actions, that means that God doesn't really believe in free will for human beings. Because he's like, if human beings are living in fear of judgment, the way that they're doing this is because they're only doing good deeds and being nice to people out of obligation, not because they want to, but because they feel they have to, so they don't go into so they don't go to hell. And I think that's an interesting concept he's talking about, doing good deeds out of obligation and fear, whereas you can do good deeds because you just want to be good, you just want to be nice. And because he says this, Jin-soo is like, well, I'm gonna go after you. I'm gonna take this shit personally, and I'm gonna make you feel the torment that I feel. I'm gonna go after your daughter and make you have to decide the fate of humanity for your daughter. And I think it's so brilliant how Sang-ho puts this into the show. Like, it's so subtle, like you don't really realize a lot of things that's happening until you see the whole big picture. Like, it's like small threads, and then at the end you see how all of these threads coming together and like form this beautiful picture. But for the two of you, so like we talk a bit about generational curses, we talk about orphans. No, there is another baby. There's a baby, and this is the one where you're just like, this is the one part of the show where you're just like, what the hell? Like, there's so much moments about this show that make you go, what the hell? But this is where a baby receives a decree saying you are a sinful being, brand new spanking baby, like 2 days old, in the hospital,
even out of the incubator.
Exactly. And the being comes out and says, you are sinful, you are guilty, therefore you must die, you will be judged, and you will face the damnation. And this is the part where I was like, no, what's going on here, Yeon Sang-ho? What really hurt? Because I was with you for everything up until this one moment. And then this is another moment where, like, with the mom, where I was thinking, oh, wait. Again, a biblical reference, beautiful biblical reference. And I think it's a reference to Psalm 51, verse 5, where it says, 5,
I love that.
I know, where it's I'm reading from the New King James Version, where it says, behold, I was born forth in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. And again, this ties into the whole idea of generational curses. And it also ties into from if you're a Christian, if you grew up in church, if you went to Sunday school, you know about the concept of original sin. Whereas because of what Adam and Eve did, again, this is an example where everything is usually blamed on Eve, the woman, that mankind is born in sin and shaped in iniquity. Mankind is inherently evil. because of the actions of Eve. Now, I personally believe that's nonsense because Adam was right there. Nobody had told Adam to go and take the fruit from Eve. He could have been like, God, you see this woman here trying to trap me? Handle her, you know?
Or walk away.
Oh, thank you.
Walk away. They're always walking away for everything else. Walk away this time.
Right? I'm like, nobody didn't make you do. You were walking in the garden with God, communing with God for an extremely, we think
best friend,
but he was in the garden for like
you could have smacked it out of her hand. You could have done so much. But what did you do? You ate it. Anyways.
No, because this is why I want to get into, because I think this whole thing, the concept of original sin and this baby, I think is an example of that, because again, it's the mother, because remember the mom, she tells that story of how she felt as a kid because she didn't understand her mother. This is another example of how he explores parenting and how children also see their relationship with their parents. And she says, I wanted to be a better parent to my daughter than my mom was to me, because she thought that her mom was being negligent of her, but it's just that her mom was always away working, so her mom couldn't devote as much time as she could to her, so they didn't have a close relationship. So she's like, I'm going to be loving to my daughter, to my child. I'm going to show my child all the love and affection that I can. But then she's wondering, what did I do to make my child receive a decree? What could my child have done in the womb to be considered evil and sinful to receive damnation? And this is again going into that you're talking about Adam and Eve, and this is the concept of original sin, and this is something also the New Truth people didn't want to explore, because then they realized that their whole idea of only specific people being judged is a lie and it's a fallacy, because then they would have to say everybody's ass should be getting judged. Everybody should get wiped out, everybody should get scraped up and sent straight to hell. But we're getting into that. But this is where I want us to discuss a bit the concept of the idea of original sin. And we talk about generational curses, but I think this is another offshoot of that, whereas you're seeing actually being discussed in the show. This is something you don't really see being discussed in media in general, but I think Yeon Sang-ho does it in such an interesting way. So for the two of you, baby, eternal damnation, what were your thoughts?
Literally, I saw the mom, Wonjina. She was walking through with the camera, and then I see the face, and I'm like, Psalms 51 verse 5. That's immediately I'm like, look at that. And I was like, what possibly could a baby? Because we grew up thinking like, everyone, you're born, you are a sinner. Like automatically you plopped on, you didn't do nothing, you didn't talk to nobody, you didn't steal anything, but you were a sinner. And that's the first thing that came into my mind. I'm like, okay, so they're going this route, that the child is a sinner because they are born as a human being in the body of flesh. They are inheriting the original sin that Adam and Eve did in the garden. And so that came to mind immediately. But then at the same time, you remember, just a episode before, you learn that this is not based on anything. This is not based on sin. This is just completely random. And I just remember sitting and watching this, I'm like, I don't know what to think. Like, you just feel so like you're Hellbound. I think it's an amazing, amazing drama, because it's one of the very few dramas that I've ever watched where I'm just sitting completely intrigued, but I have no thoughts because I just don't know. You know what I mean? It's just like, what is going on? Because yes, we can talk about the idea of original sin and that this child is receiving a decree, this legal decree from this face from nowhere, telling them that they're going to die in 3 days. 3 days, again, another number.
God's perfect numbers, 3 and 7. I think 4 is also one of them, but 3 and 7 are considered God's perfect numbers.
And so, and I was just in my mind, I'm like, what, how are they going to save this child? Because I knew that the baby nothing was going to happen to the child. I knew something was going to happen. I don't know why I felt that, but I knew nothing was going to happen to the child, but I just didn't know how. Because I knew as soon as you saw that face, nothing could stop it. Because every case that we've seen thus far up to that point, whoever received the decree, they received a demonstration. And so I was like, there's no way we can have this perfect baby go through that extremely traumatic gory, absolutely horrible death. There was no way that I think Yeon Sang-ho would do that. And I don't think us as an audience would be able to handle that personally.
No,
We
I
would
think
not be able
I
to
would have
handle
been like, what? I would have been like, no, oh, no, man, that's like close to
Yeah.
the end of the episode, the series. But I think he does it so brilliantly because and it was something that just occurred to me is that the baby is also very similar to Jinsu,
Mhm.
where Jinsu thinks or believes that he's without sin. Because he said, I did everything right to make sure my mom could come back to me. I was perfect. I was never me. But then I remember when he asked you in that scene, that's in episode 3. In that scene, I was also thinking, you believe that you never did anything wrong because you like we as human beings, we say things to people and we don't realize how what the things we say hurt people. Right? We don't realize the actions we do could have hurt people. So he believed that he is sinless, that he's perfect, and that's why he wants to torment everyone else because he believes I don't deserve this because I never did anything wrong. But I was thinking, you don't know what you said to your classmates. You don't know what the things that you could have been done, you could have done that hurt someone, right? So then it's a concept of what is sin, because but then the Bible also says all sin are equal. So this is something again we'll get into later, and it's about the measure of sin. But then talking about the baby is just like being shaped and being born in sin and iniquity, and the concept of original sin, and then the whole idea of a mother being judged for her mother's sin being carried over into the child receiving judgment for that. Again, Eve, mankind receiving eternal damnation because. But the thing is that I think he does it so brilliantly because in this writing, this scene, like you were saying, like remember you said you believe nothing would happen to the kids, but I was also thinking this is a Korean drama. Anything could happen. Just like you were, and that's such good writing because also there came a moment where I was thinking because they were saying that if they recorded the baby's judgment, it would prove to the world that this whole concept that the new truth has created is a fallacy, it's a lie. And for just a moment, I was thinking they have a point because everyone is being deceived because it asks to the cop that if this baby does die, it proves that everything that has happened has been a lie and it has destroyed countless people's lives and it needs to be revealed. And I was thinking that's some damn good writing because the fact that you understand the rationalization, you believe it, and you're thinking this is a good idea. But then because he's Yeon Sang-ho, if you've seen Train to Busan, you see how he pulls out this saving right at the end of the show. It's the same thing with the film. He gives you hope and he gives you this idea that the future children are the saving grace of humanity. And it made me think of Children of Men. If you've seen that film Children of Men, there's a scene especially where she's giving birth and she has the baby and she's walking through this battlefield and the world is destruction and people are fighting and like for just a moment these people see this woman with a baby they haven't seen in I think it was 7 years since the baby had been born on earth, and all these people go still and they're just like, oh shit, there's a baby amongst us, like there is hope for humanity. And the same thing happens in this sequence is like the monsters have come and they killed the parents. Again, this is another example of sacrifice for the parents, and this is where it shows like how true sacrifice has a benefit for the children. And like whereas for the cop, I think he did a lot of it for himself as well. But these two parents, they huddled over their child, and they protected the baby. Like they were torched, they were burned, they were judged. Actually, the thing is, they weren't judged because they never received the decree. It's the baby that received the decree. But they sacrificed themselves for the baby, and she gets up, and the baby's alive, and then it's just like Children of Men, and then it also made me think of how, as Christians, there's so many things that we question about belief and faith and sacrifice and what is the purpose of everything. And it shows you like you have to keep going, like you have to keep moving forward, you have to find something to believe in, because what is life without belief in something? Even people who are atheists, they have to find something to believe in, whether it's a job, whether it's their own families, whether it's something they do for themselves. You have to believe in something, because what would be the point? And so, and for you, Joy, like for that for the whole baby sequence, the whole baby storyline, What was that like for you? Because like that one to me, I think is probably my favorite aspect of the entire show, as well as the very last scene.
I loved that whole entire like 4 through 6
Mhm.
because Woo Jin-ah did phenomenal in it as like the mom. First of all, like I know that some people would be like, why would she take her kid to the new truth people? But it's like my child got a decree that they're gonna die. I need to find someone. And your first thing is I need to go to the authority, the leader, because they will be able to stop this. So like her acting throughout the scene was beautiful. I also thought it was very interesting how it was her who saw the decree happen. Of course, the baby can't say anything because it's a baby, but they utilized a woman again. The mom sees it. The mom is the person that has to deal with it. Yes, the dad's there, but it's like the mom is the one that has to lose the baby, has to sacrifice herself for the baby. Also, I know this is so weird, but like I thought that it was a reincarnation of Yoo A-in's character. I thought that was him. Like he came back, and I was like, that has to be why they're trying to take him again because he came back. Was I the only person thinking that? Probably. Okay. That's like that was my thing. I was like, they reincarnated him, and they're like, nah, this you too early. Like I have to take you back to hell.
Mhm.
But what I did love is the scene when they're running around and she's like, everyone look, this is my baby. They're trying to judge him. I mean, they're trying to judge my baby, and everyone just comes out and they're all looking. It's like there's truth coming. But I thought that was very powerful because it's like at that point everyone had like rose colored glasses. But now that you see that a baby is out, and it's not only that it's a baby, but it's a mom crying, you can see that this is a fresh kid that just came out the womb. You can see, like, you just see, like, you can tell the mom is just became a mom, like the way with the costume, all of that. And they're all like, what the heck is this woman doing? It's also, I think it was snowing, like, or it was just cold. So her being out there, I don't remember if she was barefoot, but like the whole scene of you could just see pain and agony, and they're all coming out of there to see it. I thought it was just so beautiful. And for them to fight, like they're fighting these huge animals. And I think this was the first time in the whole show, maybe it wasn't, but that I've seen people actually fight the
Mhm.
beast. Like
Mhm.
everyone's usually running around, but these two small people with a baby are fighting because they cannot lose their child. They're not even thinking about themselves. Like they are literally fighting these beings so that their child is protected, and for them to tie themselves around. And I love that moment because it wasn't just to protect the baby. The instinct in the dad and the mom was that if the baby's going to go, we have to go. So we all need to go together. It doesn't matter if we go to hell. It doesn't matter where we're going. Like we have to go together. It's like all of us or none of us kind of
Mhm.
thing. And I thought that was beautiful. Like I can visualize it in my head. Like oh my gosh, her crying, like Woo Jin-ah's crying face gets me all the time because she's like, whoa. And just
Got big eyes and then
yes. And then her mouth is like quivering, and I'm just like, no, please. But that whole scene of them tying each other, and he's like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. I thought that was beautiful because it's like they don't know what's going to happen, but they all know that they got to go together. And I thought,
Mhm.
wow, that was beautiful. And then it segues into the whole, then everyone knows the real truth.
Mhm.
Not just because there's a baby that was going to die, but the violence that came from the people that are supposed to protect you, the lies that came from the people that you believed, it's like that all shattered in this small place. And again, I love the whole scene because it's dark, it's night, it's gloomy. You know, things come out, things happen always. It's always dark when things happen. But the way that the apartments were, it's like this, it looked like a dome, kind of, to
Yes.
me. So I thought that was like very biblical too, because that is a space in the middle that you can be judged, but this is a place where people sacrifice themselves to not save themselves. It was literally for this innocent being. And I thought that was beautiful.
No, I
Sorry,
love
just
that.
like,
No, I
It
love the
was,
scene. I agree because the building is it's not like a typical square. Like the way how the buildings are organized visually, it's not a square. It's not like a square for an apartment building because if you're in a complex, most buildings are shaped in squares. But this one it does have a circular formation. And then I think because of the way how the bodies because they join themselves together, like who's the journalist who's at the dad, which is Bae Yeon Jae, played by Park Jamin. He and his wife, like they kind of formed. It kind of made me think of a funeral prayer, or when people were burnt at the stakes, again the whole reference to like the dark ages and the Spanish Inquisition stuff, when they used to burn people at the stakes, it kind of looked kind of like that. But then all of that, when you were talking, it kind of made me think that this is kind of a reference to Jesus too, being Jesus in a manger, kind of slightly more darker element, but it kind of made me think of that because like if because of the before Jesus was born,
that's
he was
true.
born in a manger is because King Herod had a decree out going for the death of any male child, I think under the age of 2 had to be slaughtered. So the parents, so like Mary and Joseph, like they were on the run. And so it's a similar context where like the New Truth people are chasing the parents and they're chasing the lawyer because they want this baby. They have to take this baby. So that again, that's another biblical reference, and then using the whole idea of this child representing a new future for the people and a new and bring the real new truth. This is the real new truth. This is the real story, and then having the fake truth being shown to be being shown to be a fallacy, a lie, a deception. I think it's beautiful storytelling by Yeon Sang-ho. Like he gets so much into this story, and I think the fact that like for the two of us and like for anyone who grew up in church, like this show, I think this show shows so much things that we would have been thinking about in church and when you grew up, because you do question. Because another thing that the New Truth people say, you can't question God, you can't judge God, and I'm like, who says so? Because I believe there's also a passage in the Bible says is like you can question God, you have the right to say. Like Moses does that. Moses questions God. He's like, "What is going on?"
Jacob literally wrestled an angel. He was like, exactly. "I'm not going to let you go until you tell me what I need to know."
Exactly. Yeah. All the prophets question God. All of them. Moses, Daniel, David, Solomon. All of them, the kings, the prophets, some of the disciples. Even Jesus was like, if the disciples had questions, they asked Jesus, and he would give them an answer. You can't this, and this is another thing the show showing blind belief. Like when you have blind faith and blind belief and you don't question anything because out of fear, that's how you get people, that's how people become misled, right? And like again, like back in the dark ages, like people, like for the Catholic Church, like people weren't allowed to read the Bible for themselves. Only the leaders could read from the Bible. Only people of a certain echelon in society were allowed to read Bibles because people were deliberately kept ignorant. And then when we think about slavery too, Black people weren't allowed, enslaved Black people were not allowed to learn, and they also were not allowed to read the Bible. So a lot of things in this show kind of touched on that, but I think inadvertently, because like for the New Truth people, they kept things from their citizens. And I think it's also interesting, this show references the Bible a lot, but you never see anyone actually reading the Bible.
Oh yeah. You see them making money from religion too, but you see nothing else. I thought that was very interesting. Like the New Truth people, like from their outfits, first of all, they look like a bunch of politicians.
They are politicians. They are politicians. Oh, yeah. They said, what is a church leader seeking out leaders, if not without giving them answers, other than a politician campaigning for new followers? It's the same thing. He was
campaigning, like the tracksuits that he was wearing, all of them were wearing. I was like, this kind of reminded me like when I used to have to, like when you were doing like political work, we have to go out there and like phone bank, and we have to go out there and like, what is it, not door knocking and things like that. And it's basically, that's what they're doing But instead of like, we're telling you like, hey, this is what our person stands for. Instead of doing that, they're like, this is what is happening. This is what you need to believe. But like, they're literally out there killing people, making money, taking people, encroaching on people's houses, like building museums, everything. And like, you can't say anything about it because this is God's word, this is God's law. But you don't see any of them actually doing anything. You do see them using violence, and you do see them throwing a book at you, and you do see them like literally hiding their own sin, which I thought was very interesting because there's a bunch of men in this room, and I think just like one or two women, and they are all rich. They're all doing some shady stuff behind everyone's back, behind each other's back. But it's like, no, we can't talk about that. We need to go find out what everyone else is doing. Like that was like, they were false prophets, and they didn't care about that, which is why I love that ending scene with the police when he was just watching the old man like, um let's backtrack. So they take the baby, and I love that they let the baby and the journalist walk away instead of stopping them. That was beautiful. But I thought it was interesting that like the people that were there, the neighbors were like, what are you doing? And the man starts pummeling, or I don't know how to say the word, but whatever, punching the old man in the face. And then the police is just standing there looking like, what the hell is going on? But like his eyes open, like this whole thing has been a lie. It's not even the baby. It's literally like the leader over here is using violence against his own people because his own people are questioning him when he's like, you shouldn't question God. So he starts punching him in the face. But you're not God. You're a human. Like, what the heck is going on? So sorry.
Yeah, I love that as well.
Continue.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like how it wasn't a sudden switch. I like how it took a while because the people were still in shock. And, I think a lesser show would have had the people immediately just like, oh my gosh, we're changed. But they literally watched the man get punched. And you can see everyone's eyes like, what's going on? And you can see the police officer walk and then read him his Miranda rights, and put Deacon G under arrest. And then the people it's kind of like a ripple effect amongst the masses, and they all start to realize like, oh my goodness. And then and we get to my favorite scene in the taxi.
In the taxi, yes.
Like that scene.
Give a lot. Sorry.
And that scene in the taxi and the very, very last scene. That I want us to save those two for the last end because I think they tie in so much. The two of them are actually super related and tie into everything we're discussing. But now we're gonna get into, I think, which is the overarching theme of the show, which is about how easily people are swayed, how easily people are deceived, how easily people are allow themselves to be manipulated, because a lot of these things that people weren't questioning things, and a lot of it again stems from the fact that the cop allowed the truth, allowed this lie to continue. He didn't reveal the truth, but a lot of it started because Jin-soo came up with this whole entire thing because he wanted, like we said this before, and kind of reiterating, like he wanted people to pay. He wanted to watch the world burn, and he used religion to do it. And because he was like, he himself couldn't explain what these beings were doing. Like he couldn't explain who they were. It never occurred to him that they were aliens. I like a normal person be like, oh my God, is that an alien? He was like, there has to be a reason for this. And he's like, I'm gonna use religion as an explanation for this. And I think part of that is because he grew up in the Catholic Church, so he saw he's like, okay, I'm going to use religion as my tool, like, because no one else knew about it happening. Like all the demonstrations were happening in very far off localized places, like in the middle of a jungle, in a desert, in some place isolated. And then like we saw in episode 4, like they started to happen more and more amongst people, more and more in populated spaces, which is something that hadn't happened before because people weren't really believing him. But he had a lot of followers because he's a charismatic. Yoo A-in is so good. It's the way he speaks. It's very
there's a draw.
Exactly. He believes in what he says. So because he believes in what he says, it makes others believe what he's saying too. But then also the fact he appealed to people who didn't really have any direction in their lives, people who were like, for instance, the daughter, she felt guilty, so she was looking for some kind of something to distract her. She didn't believe. I don't. She never believed in the new truth message, but like it was giving her attend. Like she felt wanted, she felt needed, and she felt like she could be useful to them, and he played on that. He manipulated and he exploited her beliefs. And then like these other people, they saw him as kind of an idol, like, you know, he was a cult leader. Like we see how people like treat cult leaders, like they're like, oh my, you're this holy being, you know. They spoke to him with reverence and deference, and they were like treating him like he was a god. And then like that happened throughout the show. But then it kind of, the difference between there's a very big shift in the tone of the show from episode 3 to episode 4. Episode 1 to 3 kind of, to me, felt like how you can see how a cult begins to form, and like a cult in the early years of its formation, whereas episodes 4 to 6 felt like sophisticated, like the cult has been established. We have rules, we have codes of conduct, we wear uniforms, like you mentioned, Joy, the wearing the coats. And we said they're like politicians. And I kind of made a comparison, like for Korean dramas, like we when you see Busan, like thugs from Busan or Joella province, like they have a very specific look, and they have a very specific like if you know the Busan dialect, you know the Busan dialect. And for a lot of K dramas, especially the crime ones, most thugs are played by people speaking with a Busan accent, as a Busan dialect, and you can hear it in these guys, these deacons. They're deaconesses in church, and they're like the church leader, the church elder, and the only thing missing were the ponytails or the cigars. But they had everything. They had the shades and the polyester shirts, and the tacky polyester shirts and the big boxy jackets were replaced by white button-up shirts and nice silk ties, and the jackets that campaigning politicians made. And I'm like, no, but it kind of made me think, like, no matter how much you try to dress up yourself on the outside, it doesn't change who you are on the inside, right? Like these are still thugs. These men are still manipulators. They're still killers. They're still abusers. They're still horrible people. They look organized. They say they're for a church, but like you're still a thug. And a lot of leaders in the church are like that. Like you're a thug outside the church. Yes. A lot of church leaders are swindlers, frauds. You're a millionaire. You want to fly on these big jets, but your church people, they can't pay the bills.
Yeah. I love that transition though, because I was looking at the outfits from the beginning and the car they had. Like it was just like a beat up van, and he's wearing big glasses and he has a backpack and he's taking the subway, versus 4 through 6 where, like, even though they're walking amongst the people to pretend that they are like the people, like you can tell they're not. You could tell. So like I love the difference between how they looked before versus how they look now.
Even like, the way they talk. You realize in the couple beginning of the episode, Jin-soo, he always addresses even Hee-jung, who's much younger than him, as Hee-jung she. And all of the kids, everybody, he always has a she to it. And you know, because he's the cult leader, and you know, if you have any experience with watching a cult or unfortunately being in a cult, when a cult first starts, the leader is very humble.
Oh yeah.
Because that humbleness attracts other people who are looking for a space to feel at home. And they see this very humble person who's calling them in honorifics, who's speaking to them in middle tone, and who is, you know, living in he's living in a goshiwon, like he's living in a tiny dorm, you know, and he has all of these followers, but he's living in a dorm with other kids from college, you know, and he's super low key. And that is definitely a trademark of a cult leader, and people really are attracted to that type of thing. And then when Jung-chil takes over, and you can see the shift, like both of you have said, from this humble beginnings to this cocky, you know, but he's also like, he's cocky and he's also it's a laughable character, because there's this one scene where he anoints Deacon G, And he's literally making this stuff on the spot.
Oh
Like
yeah.
he's literally just making this on the fly. Like he puts his head kind of like tries to anoint him, and he does some weird stuff. And then he's like, you know what, let's go back to that. Let's try to make that a little cooler. It's just kind of like this illusion where they have this whole following of people who are literally following them out of fear.
Yeah.
There's no reason there's nothing the new truth can offer them except for this respite because they are terrified. And it's just, you always, as a person, as a human, you're like, people can be led by fear, but fear can't lead people forever. Something has to change. Like you can have people under your thumb and have them fearful of you, but something, some way, it can't. Like we've seen it time and time again, through dictatorships, cult leaders. Fear is not a great factor when you're leading people, and we see that, and buy new truth.
Yeah.
No, it's true, because that's kind of like that's why I was saying, like, episodes 1 to 3 are kind of like the rough starts of a cult. Like Jin-soo, like this is where Yoo A-in, again, I think he's such a phenomenal actor, and I think everyone in the cast actually does a really phenomenal job because they play their parts very specifically. And there's a very big difference between him and Jung who's played by Lee Dong-hee, and Jin-soo is, like you're saying, he's like the younger version of a cult leader. So like they're both playing essentially the same character, but at different stages of development. So Jin-soo is like, you said he's younger, so he's appealing more to young people. He puts himself in the space of younger people, and that's because younger people are more perceptible to manipulation. And
even the old people were on his side too, because when he was walking on the subway and the old woman wanted to give up her seat, and he was like, "No, sorry, go on."
No, you're right, because that's something I was gonna. No, you're right, because it kind of shows like that most of his followers, we notice, are older or younger. We never really saw anyone who was in the middle. The only person we saw who was in the middle, this is in the beginning, was it's revealed that one of the cops, and this is, I'm gonna try to see if I can put it up on the screen. I love this sequence because it shows such a very small, subtle change and shift in how people are people's relationships can drift apart. Because you saw Kyung-eun, he has his partner. He and his partner, like they seem like they're friends. They've been partners for years. And then here comes Jin-soo, and he starts being charismatic. He starts talking about, people finding their path, about people being judged, and people should be, people need direction in their lives, and he's offering them direction. He's offering them an understanding about judgment, and he's talking this very, like Joseph, the term uses, middle tone, which is correct, and it's a very neutral tone. And like you don't hear it, but you see it where in like the change in their relationship, in these two couples relationship. And it's one of my favorite sequences in the whole show, because it speaks so much to how people drift apart. And this is where, so the three of them are walking down this alley, and they're walking towards to where Jin-soo lives, and it starts out with him behind him in the back, and the two cops are like side by side, and then this motorcycle drives up and separates them, and then it ends up with Jin-soo and the partner walking side by side, showing that their paths are aligned, their beliefs are aligned, and Kyung-eun is at the back. He's observing them. He has to catch up. He doesn't see it, but I'm like, dude, like this is a sign. This is a very bad sign for you, because like, your partner is aligning with the person who's gonna wreck your life. And I just love that sequence because it's such a small moment, but it shows so much how manipulative Jin-soo is, how he's able to separate people, how he's able to break apart relationships and families. And this happens throughout the rest of the show. Like people lose touch with friends. Like we saw like the mother get separated from her kids because of him. Because of like, like she knew she was gonna get judged, she was gonna get separated from her kids, but it's the way he did it. Like he made her doubt herself. She knew she had done nothing wrong, but he made her believe that she was sinful. He made her believe that she was wrong, and he made other people believe that she was sinful. He made other people believe that she was that she was wrong. Because the thing with this show is it talks a lot about how media plays a part in all of this, how cult leaders, how church leaders, how religious leaders use media to manipulate messages. And we're seeing this all around the world now, where like a lot of right wing conservative leaders are using media to send horrible mismessaging. We see it with the COVID pandemic, how people are using social media to spread lies about the vaccine, sending miscommunication, misleading people about the truth, and misleading people about how dangerous this pandemic is and how dangerous the virus is. And we see it, and a lot of it is being tied in and correlated with religion, right? And the show kind of touches a lot on that, because it would be I would have loved to know when because this series is based on a webtoon that Yeon Sang-ho created with, I want to make sure I give the person their due, Choi Kyu-seok. And I would love to know when they started actually coming up with a concept for this show, because I would love to see what they would do with a through line of the pandemic or a similar storyline, because we're kind of seeing it with Happiness now, that new show, where how the pandemic is kind of like playing a part in the show, but it's not the pandemic. It's kind of the pandemic happened, and now there's this new outbreak of zombies. But that's a whole different story. But like this show kind of explores how media, how cult leaders and people, charismatic leaders, use media to mislead people, and how it progresses. Like we talked about it being how it was more rough at the beginning, and now it's more sophisticated. So I want us to talk a bit now about leaders and cult leaders, and how religion is, what's the word, corrupted. That's I think that's the correct word. The word is corrupted. How a lot of this show is about corrupted belief, and how people's own faith is used against them, because these leaders, they revel in these people's destruction. They televise the demonstrations now. It's not, it happens in public, but they're like, no, we're gonna bring the demonstrations to TV. We're gonna profit off of these people's destruction, off of these people's deaths. And we see at the in episode 2, where the mom dies, and it happens like they take apart her apartment so that people could see it, so they could televise it. And we see these rich people again, how rich people profit off of the destruction of poor people. And these rich people pay. And then it shows you how a lot of these people are backed by very influential people in society who want to hide their faces, but they want to be able to enjoy the show. So I want us to talk a bit about corruption of belief, and how media and wealth plays a part into that.
My favorite leader isn't even part of the New Truth. It's the influencer, and I keep forgetting their name.
That's Lee Dong-wook. And he's an interesting one. He's a very interesting one. So yeah, we can start with him.
He was my favorite leader because he technically wasn't even connected to any of the churches, but he had a following, and he could get people, just like the rest of them. He could get them to do basically his bidding. And he just had this fancy look, and he's screaming at the camera. That's how he gets everyone. He's just in your face. So everyone's mind is like, oh, this person is telling the truth, because not only are they like speaking it, but there's anger and there's fire and there's passion in their voice as they're speaking it. But what I found interesting, wasn't even that the followers were following him or doing his bidding. What I found interesting was he believed all the stuff. Like, he had this kind of twisted mind where he believed he was a prophet, and that he was God's chosen person, which I thought was so interesting, because at the end, he couldn't believe that the baby was alive. Like, first of all, when the journalists and everyone, they finally realized who this guy was, they were like, wait a minute, he's basically a lamb in wolf's clothing or whatever, or wolf in lamb clothing. He's standing next to us, and we didn't even realize it, that he's a threat and he's going to try and kill the baby. I thought that was interesting. But for him to be there on that stage after seeing that the baby didn't die, and being like, wait a minute, coming to the realization that everything he believed in, all the judgments that he threw at people, because he's a leader and he knows what's up. He is a prophet. But to see that this prophecy didn't work, like, he could not register or deal with it not being truthful. So his way of dealing with it was to make his own, I guess, demonstration or declaration, which was to kill the baby. but that's when the monsters came after him. But he can understand why the monsters would come after him because, of course, he's a leader, he's a prophet, he's here to do God's bidding. And I feel like, to me, that was like the most impressive leadership thing. I feel like I like that more than even when Jung Jin-soo died in his darkness. So, but I also like how they show that. But I felt like that, to me, that was the best part for the leadership part. So, yeah.
Yeah. I watching this entire drama, just so many things came to mind. When people first start off in a religion, like you get a zeal, right? You get a zeal, you're a zealot, like you believe it 100%, especially when you're starting off a new religion, like when you watch or you study people who start new religions, when they first started, they believe in their life 100%. And just what Carrie was saying, how we see Jin-soo and Young-chul are just the same character, but at different points, and how Jin-soo believed in the new truth doctrine 100%, even though he knew it was a lie, like he believed that lie. Young-chul, when he becomes a leader, he knows for a fact 100% this is all BS. He knows he doesn't believe it, but he loves the power, he loves the following, he loves the glitz or the glamour that comes with being a leader. And so that is just sometimes a real natural progression of a leader within a cult, or sometimes within a religious space, where as they get more power, as they get more money, as they get more of a following and power, they start to not necessarily believe in what they are teaching. And I just thought that was really interesting, how we got to see that progression of the same character, but with two different actors and two different characters. But the deacons for me were probably the characters that I really was interested in, because they're the foot soldiers and for the new truth. They're the foot soldiers. They're the ones at the scenes. They're the ones who report back. They're the ones at the meetings. They're the ones who are they're the face, kind of, because that's who people see when at the demonstrations, or the people that they're the ones that meet with the media. They're the ones who meet with the people who are about to go through a demonstration. They're the ones that when you receive a decree that you see. And to me, I feel like growing up in the church, the deacons were your person. Like I don't know if any of you are familiar with Catholicism. Like the priest, he's kind of like separated, like he doesn't really talk to the congregants. You've got your little deacons and the people who are they're the ones you talk to, because you're not that great, you can't touch the leader. And I feel like Yuji, is that his name, with the glasses, Deacon Yuji, for me was a character that I felt was a great representation of what that is in real life. And I know we haven't talked about her, but Hijin, our lawyer, I find that so cool, how her law firm and everything associated with them is the Sodo law firm, and how when Youngjae goes to research Sodo, and he realizes, oh, this is a place of refuge in shamanism, and how the one group that protects people in this world is not the Christian or the biblical, it's the folk religion. It's the folk religion of the people. It's the folk Korean religion, shamanism. And that's where people can go for refuge. Is not this whole organization that's built upon religious truths or religious doctrine, but it's the folk religion of the people that's kind of hidden to the side. They're the ones who are taking in and hiding people and helping them. So there's that point.
No, I agree with everything you guys said. The thing with Heijin that I think is also really interesting, this is again showing how women in South Korean society are treated, or again in any patriarchal society, is how at the beginning of the show, again from episodes 1 to 3, she's looked down upon, she's talked down upon. She's a lawyer,
Mhm.
She has her education, but because again, she's not representing a big firm, she's not representing rich people, she's there to help the people who, because she like they started to investigate the demonstrations, like they knew about the demonstrations, they were like some things iffy with this New Truth organization, and they were investigating them, and then like she got really involved in it because of um of when Jung Jae died, and she again loses her mother. She loses her mother because the Arrowhead. So this is the guy Lee Dong. He is the leader of the Arrowhead people. So he again kind of like these like the leaders who separate themselves from the followers, or like even a general who like who sends out directions from the war room, not placing himself in any danger, sends out his foot soldiers to do his bidding. And so like he's the same way. He has the Arrowheads, who are these again young people. So this is again another example of how leaders, charismatics, and cult leaders use young people and use their feeling of loneliness and wanting to belong against them and to influence them into doing horrible things, because he manipulates these kids and he sends them out to beat up people. And one of these people is Hyejin's mom, who is a woman with cancer, and these kids, they don't care. And again, they're talking about, oh, you guys know more about sin than us, telling adults who've lived longer, oh, you don't know about sin. I'm like, first, I've been around longer than you. I've seen more sin than you have in your whole life, just contextually. Like, for instance, like, what are you talking about? But then I think they're also talking about how these kids have been abandoned, like Jin-soo, and they have no one to look forward to. And they turn to someone like Jin-soo, and they turn to someone like this guy, the Arrowhead leader, who again, like as Joyce said, uses big words. He talks very commanding and very forceful. He also is he's also different to the first to the older people, because he uses technology. He uses social media to influence them. He's like using, sending them out like, so go take all these cameras, and because kids are also obsessed with becoming social media sensations. They want everyone to know who they are. They want to be famous. They want to be celebrities, and they're reveling and beating at these people, but they don't care that they're harming people, because all in the back of their minds, all they care about is, I'm gonna be known. I'm doing this just thing. No man, I don't even think they believe that what they're doing is justice or right. They just know that they're famous and that they're being congratulated by the person who sent them out, right? And he is interesting. So like I want to mention this because someone was asked me about it. So like I was like tweeting, and someone asked me what I think about this character, because he's one of the few characters where for the most time that he's on screen you don't see his actual face. So because he's a social media persona, he has like his face painted in black paint. He has like the fluorescent colors, the face paint. He has like a mask of like, I believe it's a goat head or some kind of animal, and this fluorescent pink wig and like the tracksuit. And someone asked me if he is doing blackface. I'm like, he's not doing blackface, because this is it's not a caricature of blackness. It's not a caricature of black people. It's not a caricature of black religion or I think beliefs. I think he's just meant to represent this is just something he does. He's not representing like a true religion, because someone's saying like he's representing a witch doctor, because someone on Twitter made a tweet that said that he is doing blackface because he is talking about being a witch doctor and then talking about African religion. I want to be like, why would you correlate
Why did he do that?
witch doctor just with African religion, just with Africa? Every ethnic religion around the world has some iteration of a witch doctor in their cultural belief.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is not blackface, people. It's not. Because you see people on social media a lot. Like the one I mentioned on the Devil Judge is very similar. We see these people on Twitter. We see these people on social media. So this is a persona.
Yeah.
It's not blackface. I just wanted to say that because I just want to be like, this is not blackface. There's a very clear difference between blackface and what this character is. So because he has his lips painted, like he didn't make his lips like red or extra large, like how you will see in like those 1920s mammy caricatures of black women. It's not like what's the term?
Minstrel show.
It's not minstrel show. It's not doing the pickaninnies. It's not any of that. It's just something that he's doing. So please don't misconstrue this, because like if it was blackface, I would call it out and say this is straight up blackface. It's not that. But the thing with this one is like it shows again, like he is also the earlier, I think, iteration of how social media became so prominent in this storyline, because he starts making money gradually. If you look at the videos that you see, like the little ping, he starts to get more and more advertisements, and he gets more and more endorsements. So he's like the early
and he
beginnings
starts losing himself.
where they ended up with a whole TV studio, you know, like this big museum, this whole satellite, they have their own satellite channel, whatever. He's the early stages of that because he starts to get endorsements, advertising getaways, food, clothing. And I think that's such a subtle thing that Yeon Sang-ho and his team put into it, where it's like you don't notice it, but if you pay attention, you're just like, ah. So the havoc, the violence that he's promoting, that he's endorsing, gets money for him. And that's where this show talks a lot about, talking about the corruption of belief and how religion has become so commercialized and monetized in this day and age.
Ratings.
Yeah.
It's ratings. Because even the execution scene at the studio, like after he does it and he's like, oh yeah, you know, he went to hell. He slides up to the PD and says, oh, what was the ratings today? And she's like, oh, 87%. 87% of the nation tuned in to watch a man die. And he's so happy. And he's like, you know, we're gonna try to get more, you know, and it's just, and that's what it's like, you know, especially for, no offense, you know, for people who proselytize and preach online, like you want to reach as many people and they try really hard to get their ratings up and their views up. So it's very indicative of what slowly,
I felt like that's when he started slowly losing himself, like as the money was going, as people were watching the views, like he started to lose himself. Like he wasn't thinking about his mission before, like he was just gone.
But but we see that happen especially a lot on Twitter. Like people will say anything just to get clicks, to get endorsements, to get, you know, engagement. All they want is that audience engagement. Like people die horrific deaths, and we see people just like we talk about people now put up trigger warnings, say trigger warning, like video down below shows violence or death. There are people who don't care about that. They will gladly put up someone being executed, someone being murdered, someone being beaten, being brutalized on social media, because what they want is the audience engagement. Mind you, they don't think about the psychological effects of this will have on viewers, which again is another concept that the show explores very subtly. But these people don't care about you. They don't care how you might feel watching this video. They just know that as long as you click on it, that's a click for them. That's one more view for them, which translates into views, monetized views. That's all they care about. They don't even care if you just watched it for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Just the fact that you clicked on, ding, monetization. And like as Josie mentioned, that's the same thing happened with the church. Like someone was brutally murdered on stage. You don't care. What are the ratings? This means more money for us. This means advertisers. Again, rich people, conglomerates, businesses benefiting off of the destruction of poor people. Because something I think the show also, that I just realized, everyone that dies, that we have seen die on the show or have received judgment, have all been people from middle class or lower class levels of society. We didn't see any rich people being judged. None. Like there was even a scene where it was revealed that this is something that the Nutrient people didn't want people to know, that when even if you die before you receive your judgment, that the monsters will come and literally gather your soul and torch you. They didn't want people to know that, because again it would reveal that none of this has anything to do with God. Like this has nothing to do with your judgment, right? And then like it's, what was I saying before? and then it's about these people. They don't care about what they just want the money. They don't care about these people. They don't care about society. It's just about money. Again, this I just keep drawing parallels between this show and The Devil Judge, because I think these two shows do such a good job of explaining how corrupt society has become and how people use the media and how many. And I think Happiness is going to be another show kind of like that. Is like, one is Hellbound is religion, The Devil Judge is politics, and happiness is about social construct and like classism. but in very different ways. So I would love to be. I think I'm probably gonna. You know what? I'm probably gonna write a piece on these 3 shows eventually, or maybe I might do a special episode. We'll see. But yeah, I think these 3 shows actually kind of tap into the different.
He taps into with the military and how, you know, the hell that's in military. So,
Yes.
so many different shows this year were just like the different hells. Hell on Earth, hell in the military, social injustice in hell, and then I'm watching another one, Chimera, which is like, you know, it's just
because I think happiness also kind of talks about how wealth and the want for wealth can lead to people's destruction, because you know the building is like these people attain for this they want to live in these expensive condominiums, and they want to protect that at all costs, not caring that their conscience and their morality is flying right out through the window, because all they care about is like, I live in this expensive building, so it's all I can tell people that I live here. That's all that matters.
Value my property value.
Exactly. So, but that's a whole discussion for a different day. So we need. I think we've been going for quite a while.
Can we? I'm sorry, because you brought up hell. Everyone, like both of y'all know, like, what was your? How do I say this? Like, we all know they're not on Earth, right?
I believe they're
I felt like they are in limbo, or no, purgatory. I feel like they were in different stages of hell. So technically everyone's just gonna die. It's just,
you mean the characters?
Yeah, the entire thing.
The universe.
The universe. Yeah, the entire universe of Hellbound. I did not think they were on Earth. Like, when I was watching it, and when he went, Jin-soo, I'm sorry, I did not feel bad for him when he told me about his little sad story. And I was like, well, I'm so sorry about that. But like when they showed him going up there to the mountain and the evil stuff there, it clicked in my mind, because I remember learning about this when I watched the Tylicorn, and they were showing the different stages of hell, and how some of them look like they're in heaven. I mean, not heaven on earth, but it's like you're actually in hell. You just don't know it. So my assumption was that the whole Hellbound, it's like you're not technically bounded for hell, like you're in hell, but this is like you're just going through
kind of like Dante's Peak, Dante's 7. That's
Inferno.
What I should have made that in a tweet. Right? It reminded me of Dante's 7 Circles of Hell. That makes sense, actually.
Because everybody is in the first level of hell, and you're just going to different levels.
Your next stage, that's what I thought.
Actually, that makes perfect sense, because we've been going we could go on for this about this show, but we need to wrap up. Sorry, everyone, for this is going on for like real long, but we're apologize because there's so much to talk about. But this actually kind of set a perfect segue into how I want to end this, because the very last, there's 2 scenes. So there's one where we talk about how Jin has the baby, and she takes the baby and she gets into this the taxi appears out of nowhere. She doesn't flag down the taxi just drives, and she gets in the back of this taxi, and the taxi driver basically tells her like he don't know what's going on with all this new truth thing, he don't believe in it, but what he does believe in is that everyone has to look after their own business. And
everything has to be handled here.
Everything has to be handled here. And the way how I saw that was he's saying that it's because first it sounded like he knew exactly where the situation she just came from. But I'm like, man, you were not there. You did not see the fight. You
never see his face.
We never saw his face. I was thinking he is actually an angel.
Yeah.
But to what Joy is saying now, it kind of fits in that if this is like the beginning levels of hell, because it's talking about you have to atone. He's taught to, I read that as he's telling people, you have to make amends for yourself. Don't be obligated to atone to sin. Don't be fearful. Don't be, what's the word I'm looking,
don't use fear to atone for your sins.
Exactly. Don't let fear be your motivating factor. Exactly. Don't let fear be the reason that you're a nice person. Don't let fear be the fact that you finally admit that you've done wrong to people. Don't let fear be the thing that holds you back from looking forward to the future. One, he's telling her that as she has the baby, who we say is like the personification of the new truth, the real truth about everything that's happening, and for humanity to start being better, to say we have to bear responsibility for our actions, because all of these people now have to question everything that they've done last 4 years.
I have something to say about that.
And then, because all of this is happening, episode 24 to 6 takes place in 2027. So we do a time jump. So it's 2027. 7 is one of God's perfect numbers. The show starts in 2023. Another one of God's perfect numbers. The 7th day. If you know about the 7 days of creation, what happens on the 7th day? God said everything is good and let it go forth and rest. This is how you have the SDA church, who I used to be a part of. We're on the 7th day. You rest. That might be so you say I'm doing a whole lot of things.
Like, I learned stuff. Yeah.
But the 7th, God said everything is the way I want it to be. Go forth and rest and enjoy the 7th day. And then in the year 2027, the truth has now come to light. Go forth and do right finally as human beings, do right finally as people. But then to Joy's speculation that they're actually not on Earth, that is actually kind of like a level of hell. Dante's 7 circles of hell, right? And then the very last scene where you have Jung Jae come back. What?
I was, oh my God.
When I tell you, my mind went like I was
the way the glass.
It just fell apart. Just like, because every person knew, like, okay, Hejin is going to have that baby, drive off into the into the darkness, and then we're going to have our ending credits. Nope. I remember replaying that a couple times, like, is this real? What's going on?
He came back naked, like just on the floor.
Yes. And notice how the dust, literally, like the dust gathered together, like literally, like this is the formation of a being, like dust gathered together from the mud and ashes formed.
It was beautiful.
I just love the whole visual reference because it also made me think. I think he kind of tied into things like, yes, Adam and Eve being formed. Well, Adam was formed from the ground, and Eve was formed from his rib. It kind of made me think of, like, this is a new start for humanity, but it's a woman who died protecting her kids. One, but then it also made me think of, like, you rise from the ashes like a phoenix, because like her body was burnt and she came back. New and whole, so she's kind of like rising like a phoenix from the ashes, and this like of the destruction brought onto her by who? Men. I think honestly this show is very feminist. I think it's beautiful that the first person we see get reincarnate or brought back is a woman who died for her kids and who died sinless. She had no sin. She was not. She committed no sin. Because what she did, what she was being judged for. No, because I feel a lot about this. Because
seriously, because she was, her decree and her demonstration happened, and not only did they not let her even die in peace. No. They left her body in her home. They took her home and turned it into a museum where people came in without her, with nothing. She didn't consent to this. Her family didn't consent to it. They're coming into her house and using her as an example. Her story, that video being played on loop in her home.
She didn't get to rest even in death. Like
they sullied her memory. Which again, South Korean society, when it comes to burials, they are very, like, memorials mean so much to South Korean culture. Memorials play such a big part in cultures. Many cultures, like being able to bury your dead, or if you believe in cremation, cremate them and then lay their ashes someplace where they can rest in peace, or put their ashes like at the bottom of a tree or in an ocean, so like a place that meant a lot to them. She didn't get that. They left her remnants of her body there. They showed her zero respect. And the thing is with this show, if he never does a second half to this, I am perfectly happy, because like that ending sets everything that he's trying to show. Because I think he's saying is like there's redemption in death. The reason you die is not for a good cause, but like she had an unjust death. She deserves a second chance. She died protecting her kids. She deserves a chance to come back. I would love to, like, her kids, like, she's gonna look for her kids, but I also feel she's gonna go for retribution because she's like,
That's number one thing that I would do.
Call
Come after
Hae-jin up.
everybody.
Call Hae-jin, link up, because we're going after New Truth.
Yes.
But I love it. I love the name Hellbound. Like,
Yeah.
you're bound, like, because going back to Christianity, like, there's a song called Bound for the Kingdom. Like, you know you're going to the kingdom of God. Like, you know. This one is the opposite. Like, you know you're going to hell. And just, she's the first person we see outside of that opening sequence of this huge, you know, procession of her death, and like, oh, she's going to hell. She's gone. She's going to hell. And then she's the first person to come back. And it's kind of like this big FU to like, oh, you thought that she was gone. You thought that she was going to hell. You thought she was a sinner. You thought this, and that. But no, she is not. She is everything. So good.
It's so good. Because it made me, that scene made me think of the song by Ron Canoli, where it says, if you're going through hell, keep going. You're going to make it on the other side.
Yeah.
So that's also where the name Hellbound is make me think, like, okay, you're bound for hell. And for a lot of, like, the thing is with this show, like the people, the New Truth people believes in the literal hell, the literal manifestation for hell. But I'm also thinking in certain situations, like as Joy was saying, there's hell on earth. There's different types of hell for different people. Like, like someone, like, they could be sick. And like this, their health, their situation is hell for them because they're trying to make, like, this is hell for them. For other people, they'd be like, oh, you're sick, you'll get better, whatever. They're like, no, this is literal hell on earth for me. And for Jung Jae, for her, what happened to her was literally hell on earth in two ways, because she was judged as a woman for having two kids out of wedlock and for having two kids for two different men. And then she experienced hell, a hellish death, because of what happened to her. Like, she was brutalized and murdered, and no one helped her. No one stepped in to like physically help her. So like she made it through hell to the other side. So I just think it's beautiful. Like, this show is showing for people, like, you can make it out to the other side and you could come back better. And there's always a second chance for you if you want it, if you really deserve it. Because it could, then it's also making me say, well, then who's to say who deserves a second chance? I'm like, definitely her, because she was treated unjustly. And then again, this is also what church teaches us, Protestant church teaches us, and a lot of religions believe this, is like, if you lived a good life, you deserve to get a second chance at life, right? And for Christians, like, we believe, like, once you die, there's heaven. Like, you know, like, there's hell, so there's also constant heaven where you get to live in eternity in heaven with God and the angels and with other people who make it to heaven. But then I think for Jung Jae, like, her heaven is being able to be with her kids again. And like, you know, so like, there's that, she has to go look for her kids, but like, she got a second chance. I just think this show is ultra feminist. Honestly, because if you look at the end of Train to Busan, it's the same thing. Who survives? The woman and the little girl.
And even Hae-jin, who was left for dead. And the last scene in episode 3 is her in that pit, and you're like, oh man, she's gone.
She's gone. Yeah.
Gone. And then she comes back, you know, strong and even more determined than before. And then I was also thinking, again, because this show, and I was like, you know, fire so much in religion is not necessarily a bad thing for some. For some. Zach, come on, Deacon.
Cleansing fire. This is something we see a lot in Black churches. We talk about the cleansing fire God.
So when you know, they always say, like, the good people, when they go through fire, what happens? Nothing happens to them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they were in the fire, nothing happened to them because they came back stronger and better. Our good girl, she went through the fire. She was good. She was pure on the inside. So what happens? She was cleansed. She comes back because initially she was great. She was good. Oh, this show.
What about the Pentecostal fire? Look at me. Sorry if you heard this noise. It's my dog right next to me shaking.
I thought you were shaking a tambourine. I was like, wow.
No, that's Yoko. That's her collar. The thing, the tags on her collar. get the tambourine and say amen. Praise Jesus. Start singing a hymn. No.
You know what I was thinking? So in church, like this month, we've been learning to confront the destruction in ourselves and stuff. And I started thinking like maybe that's what all of them were trying to do before they died. Maybe not the first guy. He didn't even know what was going on, but like everyone else, like that was getting hidden or beaten or killed. Like they were trying to figure out like what their sin was. And sometimes I wish, like I feel like sometimes there were a little plot holes between some of the stuff in Hellbound. But what I did like, but what I wish they did do was tell us what their sins were, at least in the beginning. So then they're gonna try and figure out what their sins are throughout. But I did like that they were trying to confront whatever evil or whatever was in them before they got killed. They were trying to figure out like what happened.
I think it's important that we didn't know what those sins were because it's basically it's ultimately also telling us we have no right to judge.
That's true.
We're all from a biblical perspective. All sin is equal in God's eye. There's no big sin or little sin to God, but like to us, like we don't consider a fib to be the same thing as murder. Like there is no clear correlation. So I think that's also because I think that's also there's something the show's talking about. Like maybe we should do another episode where we talk about the concept of sin, because like this is a whole long discussion talking about why some people because that's something also that's hinted at in the show is like why some people leave religion and why some people grasp onto it, and it also has to do with sin, the concept of sin and how sin is taught to people. So that's a whole other long discussion. But I think the show is just saying like, don't judge nobody, be nice to people, don't judge women,
don't make hell for others.
Exactly.
That's one thing I liked about it.
Because New Truth was making hell for people on earth.
And celebrating everyone. And that's the thing that I didn't understand. Like they literally were becoming the oppressors that they were running away from. And I couldn't understand. I was like, do you not see what you're doing? But then again, like if you think that you're a prophet, you think that you're better than everyone, you're not going to see that. So
when you center yourself instead of the people who you're trying to serve, that's your folly. And also that self-righteous versus righteousess is not the same thing.
You know what? I think we should end here because if long, but I honestly think we could do another episode about this, about when happiness dance, because like I said, I find a lot of similarities between this and happiness, and I want to see how happiness ends up, because happiness has zombies, but the zombies kind of ultimately serve the same purpose as the monsters in Hellbound. Because the way how people die because of people's foolish actions and for not telling the truth and for giving them misinformation about what's really happening. So I kind of see a lot of similarities there. So we will have another discussion on this.
Okay.
Because we will talk about the sin of money.
Yes.
Greed. Because the Bible says what?
The root of all evil.
Yes, thank you. I know my mind dropped. Like money is the root of all. The love, not money. The love
of
money
is the root of all.
As you can tell, everyone.
And
the three of us are very similar.
Was what they were coveting money. But anyway, we will end here, and I want to say thank you to Josephine and Joycelyn for joining me for this very long discussion. But you know what? I think it's fitting because this is my first proper episode for Beyond the Romance after I took my mini hiatus in this October.
What?
I feel so special. This is my first official episode back. I did do an episode which was my interviews with the director and cast of Dr. Brain, which is showing on Apple TV, but that one wasn't like my usual recap episode or one like this. So again, thank you so much for talking with me. Thank you everyone for watching and for listening to this if you're listening on the podcast. Josephine and Joycelyn, would you like to tell everyone where they can follow you on social media if you want to be found?
I do not want to be found, but if you find me, I am, as Carrie and Joy will tell you, I am a mess. So
it's not a mess.
Yes, because we're always talking about our K-pop too. We don't only talk about K-dramas, we talk about K-pop and other
K-dramas. Oh, we're a mess. I'm a mess. But yes, thank you for having me, Carrie. Congratulations on your comeback.
Yes, congrats. Don't find me. I don't even know what I talk about, but don't find
If you find her, you
me.
find her.
Yeah.
Yes. There you
Yeah.
go.
But I want to be found.
Yes.
So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at CarrieCNH12. You can find I'm the podcast version of Beyond the Romance on butwhythepodcast.com. You can find my writing linked in my authorary on my authorary account, which is linked in the description box, and as well as in my bio on Twitter and Instagram. Follow me on Twitter using the hashtag dramas with Carrie. This is where I do my live tweets and my random observations for the current dramas that I'm watching. Follow me on follow the Saturday Night Sci-Fi hashtag which is where me and my co-host we do live tweet sessions every Saturday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for a sci-fi genre show or film, and we have a lot of fun. And you can find other episodes of Beyond the Romance, again, as I said, in my YouTube playlist under my name, Carolyn Hines. And you can find interviews that I do for the African American Film Critics Association under the Africa Interviews playlist, as well as for Carolyn Talks, where I talk to film and industry creatives about filmmaking, their art, what's wrong with the film industry, what's wrong with people, what is wrong with humanity. We get into a lot of discussions in my interviews with film directors, actors, writers, cinematographers. It's a lot of fun. And I think I am going to wrap up here. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I think I do give pretty good content. If you have suggestions for dramas you would like me to watch, you can leave a suggestion in my description box, as well as on YouTube using
10
the
out of
hashtag.
10.
10, yes, 10 out of 10.
So I think we will end here. Bye, everyone. Until the next episode, stay safe.
Bye.